When link summoning was announced, one of the first type of videos that kept popping up were top 10 lists or top 5 lists about the best decks when link summoning comes in and ruins a lot of extra deck mechanics. And while those lists are helpful, I think it's also interesting to take a look at decks that link summoning sort of makes irrelevant or impossible to play. So that's what this list is going to be. I'm going to be talking about 5 decks and I guess a 6th honorable mention that link summoning sort of ruins completely. And maybe there's some ways that you can play these decks. I mean, there's a lot of really silly combos that involve silly cards, but as far as consistently playing these at a competitive level, I don't think any of these decks will be playable after link summoning comes out. First, the honorable mention is going to be every single synchro-centric deck. I know there are combos out there when you can open like Gofu mainly, because Gofu summons multiple link monsters off of one card. But outside of opening Gofu specifically, all of these like decks like Dark Synchro and Synchrons and anything that's just trying to, and even like I guess pure Yang Zings to some extent, any deck that's trying to spam a whole bunch of Synchro monsters, I feel is at a severe disadvantage, because what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to do link summoning as their Synchro summoning, and just inherently these decks are inconsistent. That's why we haven't seen a lot of them topping in the past year or two, besides a couple tops from Dark Synchro, but it never was like the best deck, because having a tuner and a non-tuner was already sort of difficult to do consistently through like a 8 to 10 round tournament. And then also adding on top of that the need to link summon makes it just really difficult for Synchro decks. So they're an honorable mention because I know I'm probably going to get comments saying that there are combos that make these decks work, but I think realistically these decks just aren't viable going forward, and I think that we'll end up seeing with link summoning, unless we get a link summoning archetype that's revolved around synchro summoning as well, that synchro decks, or at least the decks that are only synchro summoning, like Dark Synchro and Synchrons and stuff like that, those decks I feel like are just going to kind of fall off the face of the map until they get some like broken link summoning support. And I don't know if that's ever going to come, but that's going to be my honorable mention, because it's like a whole bunch of decks that sort of encapsulate that mechanic. And yeah, I don't think they're going to be very good. To start the real list, number 5 is Ghostricks. Now, many of you may not think that Ghostricks are playable right now, but they have had some regional success. I don't think they've had any YCS success, but Ghostricks as a theme can earn some wins, and they have a lot of snowballing search effects, and their Exceed monsters are very powerful, relatively powerful at least. And the problem with Ghostricks' link summoning format is that all the Ghostrick cards, all the main ones, revolve around flipping monsters face up and face down, and link monsters can't actually be flipped face down at all. That means cards like Ghostrick Jack Frost don't work at all, but more importantly, it means the Ghostrick Field Spell doesn't work at all, and the Ghostrick Mansion on the board, the whole point is that if one player has all face-down monsters, you can attack directly. And I don't know if you've seen a lot of Ghostrick monsters, but they all don't have a lot of attack points. And Ghostrick's main win condition was using cards like Ghostrick Scare to flip all their Ghostricks face up, trigger a whole bunch of effects, and then Book of Eclipse their opponent's field, basically. And then with Ghostrick Mansion on the board, they could attack directly. That's basically impossible now. I think once we get into the thick of things with link format, a lot of decks, or pretty much every deck, is going to have to play some link monsters, and all it takes is summoning one link monster, and then Ghostricks can't operate at all. This now takes Ghostricks from a sort of fun, casual rogue level to basically impossible to play against anyone, and that's kind of sad, because those cards are kind of cool, but yeah, no more Ghostricks, at least for the time being. Number 4 is Igknights. Maybe you've never heard of Igknights, but this is one of the earlier Pendulum strategies that you could really play, like just the whole deck was pendulums, and Igknights revolve around, they all have the exact same effect that lets you pop your other pendulum scale and itself to add a ignite, or add a fire warrior to your hand. And the whole point of it is that you start your turn with a bunch of pendulum monsters, and you just keep destroying them to fill up your extra deck, add corresponding scales, and then pendulum summon everything you destroyed. That wasn't super consistent, but that actually got regional tops, multiple regional tops with the number, or the Hope Exceed monster. I'll put it on the screen here so you can see it. But that card was really the best way to summon it was through Igknights, and just sort of going through all those. They also had some really powerful floodgates that were at their disposal that not a lot of other decks could play. And Igknights were actually like low-key broken. They had a lot of ways to get to a whole bunch of exceed monsters if you built your deck correctly, and a lot of people tried to mess with them to make them good, and they're basically impossible to play now, because the problem is that all the Igknights are straight -1s, and then you compensate for those -1s by pendulum summoning them all from the extra deck, but with link summoning mechanics restricting you from pendulum summoning from the extra deck unless you have link monsters, that deck's kind of unplayable. And that stinks, because it never did anything truly great, but I thought it was a cool concept. So Igknights, probably not going to happen. Number 3 is sort of along the same lines, but that's Metalfoes. Now, Metalfoes have had a ton of success, and in the same regard as Igknights, if you've ever played a Metalfoes deck, the main reason you're playing it is to pop your own cards, fill up your extra deck, and then pendulum summon them back. And the Metalfoes are cool because they pop cards as 1-for-1s by setting the Metalfoes spells and traps, and then when you pendulum summon, you're getting +1s. So they're sort of like just an objectively better version of Igknights. The main problem with that isn't only the Igknight problem of filling up your extra deck, it's that with the new mechanics, the pendulum scales take up your spell and trap card zone. So that means that if you have a bunch of Metalfoes effects, you can't actually activate more than 3 of them because it would fill up all of your back row, and that a lot of times you're using at least 2 of them, usually 3, and if you're using 3 in a turn, that means you can't set any other like real back row, like Solemn Strike or Torrential Tribute or Dimensional Barrier. You can't set any of those because then your scales are filled up. Now, Metalfoes might be used as like an engine, which we've seen pop up before. Like, you might play Metalfoes Zoo still if Zodiacs don't get hit any harder on the ban list. That's a pretty popular deck. We could also see Metalfoe Cosmos because those don't have a ton of back row. So you might see it as like an engine, but as far as like a pendulum summoning theme that fills up the extra deck, sets a whole bunch of back row for free, and then pendulum summons 5, it's just not going to happen. It's impossible. And there are other pendulum decks that don't just automatically lose with link summoning, like Dynamists are a perfect example of that, and even Magicians to some extent because they have Oath Dragon Magician. But as far as Metalfoes go, they just rely way too much on having all 5 spots of their back row open, or at least 4 of them, and by taking those away, you make the deck really, really hard to operate. Number 2 might come as a surprise pick to some people, but I think Heroes are looking pretty bad with link summoning. Heroes have popped up at a ton of regionals and YCSs pretty much since the beginning of time, but also, we're talking about masked heroes here. Dark Law has been just a huge threat, but as a lot of hero players know, 1 Dark Law is not enough to win a game. You usually need trap cards, you usually need Rafflesia, and then recently people have been using Bahamut Shark and Totally Awesome next to the Dark Law to totally lock their... Sorry, that's a pun. That was an unintended pun, but you lock your opponent out of all their cards, and that's impossible with link summoning unless you open like Totally Broken. Already Heroes weren't the most consistent deck at getting that opening. You did need some specific cards, and your opponent needed to have like no hand traps, but you can't... how it's being ruled is that you can't, without link monsters on the field, you can't summon Bahamut Shark and then special summon the Totally Awesome. You need link monsters to go to those extra zones, and that's unfortunate because it's going to be really hard for Heroes to somehow make enough monsters to give you 3 spots to summon extra deck monsters, and then also make the Dark Law and the Bahamut Shark and the Totally Awesome. It's just not going to happen. It's asking way too much of a deck that doesn't have that many resources to plus off of like that, and if Heroes can't top any more with what they have that are like pretty much at full power right now, I don't think they can top after link summoning. And the number 1, I don't know why I said 1 twice. I do know, but okay. It's Burning Abyss. I think you all saw us coming. This is sort of the worst deck when link summoning comes out, which sucks because I've been a huge fan of Burning Abyss. I know Burning Abyss is sort of a running joke at this point because people say that it never gets hit. It's never hit hard enough on the ban list despite being hit on like 5 different ban lists, but that's besides the point. If you've been hating on Dante all this time, well, lucky you, the deck's finally fucking dead, because what happens with link summoning is that to summon multiple Dantes, you have to have link monsters on the board, but if you have link monsters on the board, your Burning Abyss monsters all just blow up immediately. So I'm sure there's some like fancy tricks around this. I mean, obviously, if you use Tour Guide or Crane to negate the monster's effect, then you actually can summon the Burning Abyss monsters and they don't die. But in general, the Link summoning mechanic, I feel, hurts Burning Abyss the most out of any other archetype in the entire game, more than any of the Pendulum strategies, because it actually just makes the deck unplayable. One Dante into one Beatrice is just not enough for the deck to compete, and you really need your other Exceed monsters on the board to maintain your advantage. So anyway, that was my top 5 list for decks that get ruined by Link summoning. If you agree with me or don't agree with me, let me know in the comments, and I will see you guys later. Bye.